So welcome everybody to our developer workshop series. This is our fourth installment of the series. And today we're going to be talking about simplifying and troubleshooting when you are building with the Video SDK. So my name is Rahima Armorer, and I'm a developer advocate engineer here at Zoom. But before we get started, I'm going to pass it to Kelly and allow him to introduce himself before we jump in.
Oh, no, I'm on. This is always a scary part. So I'm Kelly, and I'm a senior developer advocate here, and I'm focused on Video SDK and all things video and that kind of stuff. So I'm going to talk to you about UI Kit in a little bit after Rahima goes through some definite best practices and some troubleshooting that might help out along your way. So.
All right, thank you, Kelly. So now let's go ahead and get started. So we're going to go over, we have 3 objectives for today. The first one is going to be setting up, so learning how to set up your environment for success. The next one is going to be reviewing the best practices for app building. And then our last objective or goal is going to be to gain knowledge on building with the UI toolkit. So we're going to go ahead and get started looking at creating the best environment for working with the Video SDK to have the best experience. The first thing I want to go over is enabling shared array buffer, which is an API that the web uses to have just a more enhanced experience when working with video. So for example, shared array buffer is what allows us to stream with 720p. It's what it allows for gallery view, and it also allows for noise suppression when working with the Video SDK. There are 3 ways that you can implement shared array buffer. One is through cross-origin isolation. The other is through using credentialless headers, which is going to be the one that we preview today. And then the last is going to be using Chrome origin trials. We have a little snapshot that this is directly from our documentation, and we can drop that link in just a second. But this snapshot is showing us, the different aspects of each solution. So with cross-origin isolation, this one is harder to implement, but it's a permanent solution. With credentialless headers, this one is easier to implement, and it is also a permanent solution. And lastly, with the Chrome origin trials, it is the easiest to implement, but it is a temporary solution, as this does have Chrome origin trials. They do have an expiration date set with them. So again, we're going to go ahead and preview credentialless headers today and look at what that solution looks like. I'll preview it now in just a second, and Kelly will talk a little bit more about it in his demo towards the second half of this workshop. So I'm going to pause my screen share quickly and just hop into another tab and show us what this looks like. Let me zoom in. All right, so when we look here, we're going to look on lines 23 through 30. And Kelly, we can see this, right?
Yes, I can see your screen. Absolutely.
Perfect. Always want to make sure. So we'll see here, this is something that Kelly built out within the application. And we'll see that he set his headers using cross-origin policy, same origin, and cross-origin embedder policy to require port. So Kelly did just go ahead and send out a link that talks a little bit more about it. So we're going to go ahead and jump back into our slideshow and continue from there. But this is just a preview of what these headers look like. Again, Kelly's going to talk a little bit more about it in our second half. All right. So now we're going to go ahead and look at the Video SDK session lifecycle before we jump into those best practices. Our best practices are broken up into 3 sections, and they follow the lifecycle. So the first is going to be pre-session. This is how you're going to prepare users and developers for a successful session. We'll talk about some key features for your pre-session, but I do want to emphasize that not all the suggestions are going to be mentioned in this workshop. In your resource tab, you are going to see a link to the UX best practices on our documentation. And there you're going to see all the suggestions that are listed for the SDK lifecycle. After pre-session, we're going to look at in-session. This is during your session with the Video SDK. And I do just want to remind you all that session is what we use when we're working with the Video SDK, not meetings, sessions. So in session, we want to make sure that the state of the session is clear to all users. You want to know what's going on for yourself, and you also want to communicate that to any participants within your session. Lastly, we're going to look at post-session, and this is when you make sure that users know that users are leaving. You're communicating that to those who are in the session. You're communicating when the session ends and making sure that's clear. And you're destroying the Video SDK client so that you can properly reuse it again in the future. So this is the Video SDK session lifecycle. We have pre, in, and post session. We're going to go ahead and move on to pre-session. So before you start your video SDK session, you want to make sure you're utilizing await functionality. Now, the reason that you want to use await functionality is because you're running two main functions. The first one is going to be client.init, and the second one is going to be client.join. Now, if you've never worked with the video SDK and you're a bit confused about what all this language and jargon means, we do have a video SDK workshop, our first one that was released about maybe a month or so ago. And we have a link to that recording where you can watch the process of getting set up with the video SDK and see what these terms mean. But for now, we're going to jump back and look at these two functions. So when you initialize your session, you're calling client.init, and this is a promise. That's where the asynchronous behavior comes into play. You need to make sure that the init promise resolves before you go ahead and call the client.join function. So in this screenshot of code that we see here, the functionality is being wrapped in a use effect. First thing we're doing is calling client.init, and then we're using a try catch block to go ahead and call client.join. So on the successful resolution of client.init, we're going to go ahead and call client.join, but it has to be done in this order. Now, it doesn't have to be tied together like this, where we have a try catch block, but you do have to make sure that client.init is called first and successfully resolves before you call client.join. So that's going to be our first, mandated suggestion for when working with the video SDK. You have to use some asynchronous functionality, and client.init has to be called and resolved before client.join. Going to give us a few seconds for questions. Go ahead and just look this over. Again, we do have a workshop that was recorded about a month ago where we walk through getting started with the video SDK and dive deeper into what this terminology means. And you can also find out more about it within our documentation. All right, I'm going to go ahead and move on to our next pre-session tip that we have. So you want to implement a preview flow, and perfect, Kelly just dropped in that account setup workshop, so we have that. So you want to implement a preview flow before you start your session. So the preview flow, think of when you are about to join a meeting, when you're working or when you're on the Zoom client and you have the option to preview your camera and turn it on and off. Oh, I'm sorry, I'm just reading a question here. Kenneth asked a question, do we have any custom exception classes, or is that up to us? Kenneth, I'm going to keep going and I'll come back to your question after we go through the slide, or if someone answers in the chat, that would be perfect as well. So we have the preview flow, and this is, think of when before you join a meeting on the client, you have the option to see yourself in the camera and turn your camera on or off. All right, and then so what that does is it allows users to pre-select devices and save those as well. So you can pre-select your camera, you can pre-select your speaker, and you can also pre-select your microphone, and you can also test them and make sure they are working to the best of their ability before you join a session. The preview flow also, to implement the preview flow, you're going to want to use two main methods, and you're going to use these methods on your imported Zoom video client. And you're pulling that in from the Zoom Video SDK package that would be downloaded in your application. So the first method is going to be get devices, that allows you to look through and find the camera devices and find the audio devices. And the next method is going to be create local video tracking. So we have a screenshot to the right. We're going to go ahead and look that over and talk about what that does. I'm just going to give us a few seconds to look that over silently, and I'll come back and explain it out loud.
So Rahima, real quick. So in the preview section, are we connected to a session at all yet?
We're not connected to a session at all. That's a great question, Kelly. Not connected.
Okay, so then we're using basically our local media stream at this point. Is that what's happening?
Yep. And then making sure, did I answer your question fully, Kelly?
Yeah, I think it just got a little garbled. So maybe try answering one more time for everybody.
Okay. Yeah, perfect. Sorry about that. My audio is getting
no, it's okay.
So Kelly asked, when you're doing a preview flow, are you in your session? No, you are not in the session yet. You do not need to have a session started to implement the preview flow. And then Kelly asked a leading question, which is, does this mean we're using local media? And yes, that is what it means. Was that clear?
Yeah, no, that was beautiful. Yeah, so this is all done before we ever, we're even talking to Zoom at this point. This is all just local stuff. So
yep, that is correct.
Okay, cool.
Yep. So now let's go ahead and just take a second and walk through the snippet we see on the right side. So the first thing that's happening is that we are importing that Zoom video object from the Zoom Video SDK package. Then we're going to go ahead and declare two global variables. One is going to be video devices, which will be an array that we'll use. And the next one is going to be our local video track. So that's going to, like Kelly mentioned, use our local media. So we're going to go ahead and call that first method get devices. This is a promise, so we're going to chain on the then method to work with the resolution of our promise. What we're going to do is use the filter method on our array and go through, on our object, and go through and store any device that has the value video input for its kind. We're going to store that in the object video devices. So what this essentially is doing is it's going through this object that we have, and it's finding anything that is video input, and it's storing it to our array, so that later on in this next section, we can go through that array and find our video. So we're going to use our variable local video track, and we're going to save that to the output of calling create local video track on our Zoom video object. So what this is going to do is it's going to allow us to create the video track. That is what we're going to see when we do the preview and we see ourselves pop up on the camera. We're going to search through this array that we created, video devices, find the first device, and save the device ID. So we're searching through our created array. We're finding the first device, and we see that with index 0, and we're saving the device ID. That's going to be our local video track. Then when we want to turn on the camera for our preview, we create a function, preview video button, and then we run the start method. And this is going to allow us to start our camera, use that local video track or local media, and we're going to append it to the HTML element preview camera video. So that's going to be the HTML element where the video appears. And I pulled this code straight from our documentation. This is just one way to do it. It doesn't have to be followed in this exact order, but it's incredibly helpful to have this. So you can go into our documentation, and in the section on Video SDK where it says add features, you can find the preview feature, and that's where you'll see this code. And it, again, is very useful to use. You don't have to use it the exact same way, but it's a great reference. Oh, and perfect. Thank you, Kelly, for getting to that back to that question. So
yeah, I was just going to mention that I just answered in the chat Kenneth's question. Thanks for grabbing that.
And I'm just going to read Kelly. I'm going to read the question again and then read Kelly's answer out loud. So Kenneth asked, do you have any custom exception classes, or is that up to us, up to the developer? And Kelly answered, the Video SDK provides some specific error types to provide specific guidance, but handling them would be up to you. And then Kelly went ahead and also dropped a link to those error types. So now we're going to go ahead and move. Thank you, Kenneth. Now we're going to go ahead and move into in session. So this is where you have started your session, right? Now we have the ability to, allow people to join our sessions. We have a host, we have participants. And in session, one of the most important things that you want to do is one of the most important aspects is how you start your audio. So you want to avoid automating the start of your audio, and you can avoid the automation of this by tying your start audio function and tying that to an event. So making sure that is triggered by an event, and that event could be a button click, right? So what the button click does is it allows for a feature where there's user interaction. A user may click the button join audio, and then that's going to trigger the start audio function. You want to make sure this isn't happening automatically. You want to make sure there is some user interaction to start our audio. Some other things that you can do with audio that'll be helpful to make it clear to participants what's going on in the meeting. You can add animation to your microphone icon, and that will allow us to see when people are speaking. So I'm seeing it right now on my screen. My microphone is filling up gradually with green to show me that I'm speaking, and to show me, when my audio is increasing or decreasing. You can add that in using CSS to your application, and it just makes it clear to other participants someone is speaking, and it also makes it clear to yourself that you're being heard and your audio is being picked up. Additionally, you can show the microphone status for mute and for on mute. So you'll see in the client, when you mute yourself, there's a red line that goes through the microphone, and that just allows us to know that we're on mute. We've all seen the memes and the teachers that say you're on mute with Zoom. And the only way we know this is by adding a feature that shows it. So it doesn't have to be the red line like you see in the client. It can be anything you want, but you do want to visualize to users when they are on mute so they're aware that they're not being heard. So those are, again, just some suggestions for when working with your audio in session. This list is not extensive nor exhaustive, but you can look at our UX best practices documentation and see some more suggestions there. I'm going to go over this code we have on the right side. So this is just very simple. We have a start audio button function. It's named appropriately because this is the function that will be triggered when the user clicks the button to start audio. When that button is clicked, we're going to go ahead and call the start audio function on media stream. That should say media stream, not media stria. So on media stream, we're going to call the start audio function. And again, we just have that tied to a button. So there is user interaction and it's not starting automatically.
Yeah, so we just had a question from Alan regarding whether or not the browser would ask for permissions. And it does with my application, so I was going to show them that later as well. But when you come to the site and it's trying to access those, it'll the browser should ask for permission to the mic and in camera. So
yeah, perfect. And like Kelly said, he's going to demo that later on. But yes, you definitely do want to ask for permissions before starting video or starting audio within your browser. All right, so we looked at what it takes to start your audio properly within your session. Now we're going to go ahead and look at rendering your video. So we suggest, highly suggest that when you're rendering your videos for multiple participants, you do so on one canvas. So this is going to ensure the best experience when rendering video, even if you're rendering, 5 videos at a time. And you can do this by adjusting the positioning within your render video function. So render video takes in a few parameters. I think it's about 6. About 6 parameters. And then the middle 4 are going to be where the video is situated on the canvas. So we're going to look at that example in a second, but just want to rehash that. What you're going to do, you're going to change parameters within your render video function, and that is going to allow you to manipulate where a video is positioned on the canvas. So now let's go ahead and look at this code on the right side. We're going to see that we have the same function being called over and over again. It's being called 4 times for each participant. And we're going to also see that the same HTML element is being used for each call of render video. So participant video canvas is used here, 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 and here. And this just shows us that each video is being rendered on the same canvas. Now, the way that we make sure everything is positioned correctly is that we're going to go to our 2nd, 3rd, 4th, and 5th parameters, and we're going to change that around. So we'll see 960 and 540 is going to remain the same, but these 2 parameters right here, so in the first call, it's 0 and 540. These 2 parameters are our X and Y axis positions. So we see here we have 0 and 540 for X and Y respectively. And then we're going to see that switch. We have 960 and 540. Then we're going to see 0, 0. Then we're going to see 960 and 0. So if we follow that logic, what it's doing is placing each video in a different corner for the canvas. So there are going to be 4 corners. Each video will fall into one. So again, for each participant, we change those 4th and 5th parameters, and we change and adjust those accordingly. And an example of what this looks like, of what a block canvas looks like, is seen within our documentation. We can drop that link as well. We can drop that link as well, but that's going to show you what the canvas looks like rendered.
Rahima, yeah. So Mateo asked a question: how can we handle eventual page resizes, or should we rerun this every time a new participant joins to realign all the screens?
Yeah, that's a great question, Mateo. So there is some math logic that goes into resizing the canvas and resizing participant screens when someone leaves and when someone joins the video call. So that is logic that is up to you, but essentially it's just going to be math logic that's put together to resize the canvas on command, right? So that might look like calling a function when someone leaves and when someone joins, and using that functionality to resize participant videos. So that is a very high level answer, but a shortened version is it's math logic that goes into place, and you don't need to re-implement this every single time. You can utilize some logic and call that functionality when an event happens. All right, we're going to keep going. So this is our last suggestion or best practice for when working within your session of the Video SDK. You want to send notifications to your users in your session. So you want them to know when something is happening. You do that by using the Video SDK event listeners. We have a number of different events that are listed, and you'll use those. Some different examples of notifications that you may want to send include connection issues. So you want to let somebody know if they're having an issue with their connection. I know I've seen a message pop up on my client that says your internet is unstable, even when I think it is. I get a message that your internet is unstable, and that's a great notification to have. You also want to notify users when the host is ending the session. And you also want to notify users when someone is leaving or joining. Now, this one this one has really great importance if you're creating an application that takes attendance, for instance. So let's say you create a classroom and you need to know when a student is joining the classroom. You need to know when they are leaving the classroom. This feature or this notification is really helpful for when you're building an application that may take attendance. And that even speaks to the breadth of what you can do with the Video SDK and the number of options that you have when building with it. So let's go ahead and look at the code on the side and see what's happening. So we're going to see here we have a function called user joined. What this function is going to do, it's pretty simple. It's going to send a message, and the message is going to say a user has joined. This message is just coming from a UI library that was used and designed. So message is going to send an alert at the top of the screen, and it says user has joined. This function is going to be triggered on the event user added. So I was able to find this event by looking in the Video SDK event listener library. I found that there was an event for when someone joined. So when this event happens, client.on, it's going to trigger the function user joined. And all that means is when someone joins, I'll get a message that someone is here. You could customize this a bit more if you like. This is a very simple version, but it just shows us how we can combine event listeners with notifications to let people in the session know what is happening. All right, pausing here again, going to go ahead and look through the chat and just see some of these questions that are being asked and answered.
So I answered that as it does require absolute numbers, but I'm not positive it absolutely does, but I think it seems to work best when you do. So I'm trying to find validation to back that up for sure, but it could take percentage. I just haven't tried it.
That's my understanding as well. I've used numbers as well. I haven't, like you're saying, I haven't found anything about using otherwise, but
let us know, Aaron, for sure, because I definitely want to go back and try that now myself. So,
all right, these are really good questions, everybody. Thank you for asking.
Definitely keep them coming.
Yeah, keep them coming. All right, so that was our last in-session best practice that we went over in this workshop. I'm going to emphasize it again. There is a longer list of best practices within our documentation, and they are great things to pay attention to, so feel free to save that page of our documentation. So now we're going to look at what happens post-session. So your session has ended. How are we going to do this properly? So for the participants in your session, you definitely want to alert them that the session has ended. So you can send a message, host has ended the session. Again, this is similar to what you may see in the client when the host ends the meeting. So you want to send a message or send an alert their way. And then also on the developer side, so those who are building the application, you want to make sure you destroy your Zoom client properly. Doing this allows you to reuse the client without any issues. So to do this, here we're going to see an anonymous function. And this is actually being called at the end of a use effect. So with use effect, you have the option to use an anonymous function and assign a cleanup method to run at the end of every use effect call. So for this use effect, the cleanup method is going to be calling the destroy client method on our Zoom video. What this does is it destroys the client, it definitely effectively ends the session. And this way you can essentially restart and reuse your client without running into any issues. So no matter how you initialize your session, you always want to be sure to follow that by destroying the client so that you don't run into any issues rerunning the same function twice. So this one is pretty simple. This is not everything you want to do, but these are some important things. Alert users that the session has ended, and for sure, definitely make sure you destroy your client. And perfect, Kelly got some definitive backing that it definitely requires a number. So this is to Aaron's question, just piggybacking off of some documentation.
Yeah, so definitely is a number now, but we'll like I said, I'm working on a couple of things. We'll see if we can get something figured out to make that a little easier.
A couple things up your sleeve.
We'll see. We'll see. Yeah, well, yeah. I'm always wearing sleeves. That's true.
There we go. All right, so we are going to go ahead and continue to move on. This is going to be the last slide within our video SDK lifecycle and different best practices. Now we're going to go ahead and move on to troubleshooting. So these are some common errors that we see when building with the video SDK. These are errors that I have seen. I know Kelly has seen these errors. If you've built with the video SDK, you more than likely have seen them as well. And we've also heard from you all on the forum that these are popping up. So we're going to go over what these errors are, what they mean, and what are some possible root causes. So the first error, this account does not exist or does not belong to you. So this is going to pop up, and this is going to pop up if you're trying to join your session and you run into an issue. So what you want to do here, there are 3 things you need to check. Check your role type. So you want to check your role type and make sure that you are passing in an integer, not a string with quotes. So if you're unfamiliar with what I mean by role type, when you are generating your job for the video SDK, you need to pass in a payload. And one of the values that are taken in the payload is going to be your role type. Now, 1 signifies you're joining as a host. 0 signifies that you are joining as a participant, but you need to check that value because whether it's 1, whether it's 0, it needs to be passed in as an integer, not a string. So make sure that it's not wrapped with quotes. You also want to check your credentials. Make sure you are using your video SDK secret and key. So you don't want to use your meeting SDK credentials, and you don't want to use your video SDK API credentials. Now, we went over what it looks like to create an account and gain access to those credentials in our previous workshop. That is linked within our workshop resources page, so you can go ahead and watch that if you need a refresher or for the first time to see what it looks like to access those credentials, but you want to make sure you're using the right ones. And lastly, this one may seem a bit obvious, but make sure you have a paid video SDK account. As we mentioned in our last workshop, you do need to make sure that the video SDK account is created separately from your Zoom account. This is a separate account with a separate email, and it is a paid account. So these are the 3 things you want to check if you run into this error. I'll go ahead and pause here for questions, any clarification that may be needed before we move on to our second error. All right, so before we move on to the next error, we have a visual aid to look at what this looks like. So we're going to see that we have our meeting args, and then we'll see our role is wrapped as a string here. Then we're going to see the error, join meeting failed. This account does not exist or belong to you. Next, we'll see where we have our role passed through as an integer, not as a string. There's no error appearing. All right, so now we are going to look at our second error that we may run into, which is going to be invalid parameters. So your parameters must be inputted in the exact order when passing them into your join function. And we're going to go over what that exact order looks like. So essentially, you may run into this error when you're trying to join a meeting and your parameters are not passed through correctly. This is for the client.join method that we see here. So you're going to pass in first your topic, then you're going to pass in your generated JOT token, and then you're going to pass in your username last. Now, if the host of the session has set a passcode for the session, this is the 4th required parameter. So if you are creating a session and you have set up a password or a passcode, this is going to be your last required parameter, but a passcode is not required. So if you do not set one up, you only have 3 required parameters. So we're going to see on our first picture down here, we're passing through client.join. we have topic, name, and then signature. This is wrong. We're going to see an error pops up at the bottom, join meeting failed. And this is, sorry, the wrong screenshot. The correct screenshot is going to say invalid parameters, but at any instance, we see that we have an error. That's the main point that we're getting across. When we pass it in client.join topic, signature, name, this is the correct order. It's not going to produce any error and you should be good to go. So again, if you see invalid parameters, I ran into this error like a month or 2 months ago, and I think my brain was just tired and I could not figure out why I was running into it. I was about to start banging my head into my desk, and then I changed the order of my parameters and I said, this makes sense. So you definitely want to make sure you check this, give yourself a less stressful time than I did. All right, now we're going to move on to our next error you may see, which is topic, token, username must be string and are required. So you want to make sure those 3 values that we just talked about with your join function, make sure all of these are strings, making sure they're wrapped in quotes. So even if you store these variables, or even if you store these parameters as variables and you pass them through dynamically, you want to make sure that when they're first stored, they are stored as strings. You also want to make sure that your set topic matches your topic value in your JOT generator payload. So if you look at the documentation that Kelly sent a few messages ago, you're going to see that the payload for the JOT requires a TPC or topic value. You want to make sure that the topic that you pass into your join function matches the topic in your payload for your JOT generator. And then, yeah, that's a really good emphasis that Kelly made. The first 3 params that are listed, they are not optional, so they're required. And Kelly did also drop in the documentation for the join method, so you can see what that looks like and just get further clarification on what that join method does. So the last one is going to be invalid session key. So the session key is an optional parameter or an optional parameter unless it is set by the host. There's always one more error. That is so true. This is mimicking real life. So if set by the host, you must enter the matching session key inputted by the host. So again, it is optional, but if it is used, it has to match the one that is set by the host. The best way to avoid this error is to make sure you're making your session key known when creating a session, right? So let's say you're creating a session to live stream yoga with your friends. If you've created a session key, you need to let everyone who's joining the session know what it is so no one runs into any errors when attempting to join. So make it known. That's the best way to avoid this error. So that is, I promise, that's the last error. That's the last error we're going over. I'm sure it's not the last error that you'll ever see, but it's the last one we're going over for now. Go ahead and stop sharing my screen, and I am going to pass it over to you.
All right. Okay, so I have a messy desktop as usual, so let me get a few things out of the way. But I'm going to start with essentially this application is something I've been working on, and I have it released on my I thought I had this pulled up, but one second. We'll go to mine, and I have it right here. Okay, so I have this demo that you can actually clone if you want. You don't have to go through any of this right now. Don't feel like you need to. There is a README that sort of has all this work through, and I'm still kind of, this is not it either. Hang on one second. There it is. I almost shared the wrong link there. That would have been confusing. Okay, so we're going to start with this one, much simpler. All right, so excuse me one second. I can think at the same time. There we go. All right, so that'll get you to the repo here, and it's just a real simple app that uses UI kit. It has a server, and we're going to walk through a couple of those pieces just so you know sort of what all's going on. In order to get it running, all you're going to need is your SDK secret and key, which I was showing in the marketplace. So you go log into your Video SDK developer account. You're going to scroll down, grab your SDK credentials here, copy the key and the secret. This is going to become a .env file, and everything will then run off of this. So when you start up your app, it'll look for your .env file, pull everything in as a configuration, and allow you to do that. So That's how you get it credentialed. You put your key and secret here. That is plain text, so obviously you don't want to push that up to a cloud anywhere somebody can access that. You want to have that encrypted. If you do want to deploy something like this, you want to put that into a server-side environment, not into just a plain text file. So there's your warning. For sure, do not do that kind of thing. So this is really about as straightforward as a demo can get, or like a sample app can get. What we have is an HTML file, and let me go through the UI kit first. I'll show you what we're actually sort of building and what we're using. So the UI kit is UI toolkit is it's just basically pre-built user interface that basically allow you as a developer to put in some of the tools that you need to run a video session without having to go through a lot of extra effort to build those things out. So kind of a shortcut for you to get things kind of moving. Everything that you can do in the core set of video SDK features, you can join and leave all the sessions. You can do videos on and off, front or back camera, mute and unmute, chat. It will display the first two names of the character, a user's name when the camera's off, that kind of thing. So it is a beta tool, but it is something that is rapidly gaining a lot of traction and support and community response and that sort of thing. So we're definitely encouraging people to give it a try and see how it goes for you. But in a getting started sort of demo app, this is a great way to sort of get a feel for how things are going to flow. And the installation and getting it running is pretty straightforward as well. It's just an npm module that you can pull in. You can link directly to the style sheet. You can link to a script and pull those in. And this is a type module. So being old, I don't remember type module being a thing. So this is all some new stuff and learning how modules and those things work directly in the browser now. And I'm just like fascinated and like, I feel like a kid again. It's all new and awesome, which makes me feel super old that things have changed so much. Anyhow, don't make fun of me, please. And so it does. So. What's that?
Passion is infectious.
Experienced, yes. Very gray is experience. That's what.
Why is an experience? That's what it is.
Yeah. I wear hats for a reason. Okay, so we'll talk about like rendering a preview with the UI kit toolkit, joining the session and leaving and all that sorts of thing through the app itself. So let me walk you through that. And this app is pretty straightforward. It's just a quick drop in a username. You can pick a user role or as a host or a user. It comes into a preview. I can test, make sure everything's going to work, that kind of thing. Hit join. Make sure the audio is enabled. And then I can turn my camera on. Oh, see, it's on my wrong camera. Sorry.
Little thing there.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. That was that's my Stan Lee. So he's hanging out back there. He's in superhero outfit. Yeah. It's my little. It's supposed to be a bobblehead, but it doesn't bobble. I'm not sure if I did something wrong or my kids broke it.
Still head. That's what it is.
It's yeah. Anyway, so then I can leave and it'll kick me out and say thanks for joining and I'm back to the beginning. So it's pretty simple. Only like 4 states to it, and it's all HTML and JavaScript. So I kept it as simple as it could be, as I could possibly keep it. So a couple of things. I want to start with the server, and so it's running on an Express server, which is up here. So Express has basically been my go-to server, I don't know, since 2009. So I guess it's been a while since it's probably not been around since 09, but 12 or whatever it's been, 10, at least a decade. After you get past like 5 or 6 years with technology, you sort of stop counting because you don't really want to know. So then I have a Zoom auth file here, which is actually running my JOT token generation. This is all run on a server side, so it's not exposed in the client. I don't want to run this sort of JOT generation on the client because that would be bad security practice in general, and obviously, somebody could just steal stuff and that kind of thing. You don't want that. We don't want that. You don't want that. Nobody wants that. So this is my generate token function that just takes in my SDK key, the secret, and then passes that into a method and returns a signature, all signed using the JavaScript RSA signing package. It's just a node module that gets installed. So only 4 basic dependencies. This one here, there's a .env file that you need, and then .env module, the Zoom UI kit, and then Express itself. So just those sort of basic things and some build tools. So anyways, this function gets ran at this API generate post call, which is just an API route that gets called. It passes in the request, and inside that request, I'm going to have a topic and a role type, which I have to pass in. And then it will grab my signature and return that signature to the front end. Now, the signature itself is not necessarily, as long as it's got, like short time to expiration. So the typical expiration on these is going to be, I have mine set for 2 hours. The minimum is 30 minutes. The maximum is 48 hours. So you want to stay within that, but JOTs inherently will eventually expire, and the shorter lived they are, the more secure they are. So this is that specific route here in Express that gets built. It just pulls in, like I said, pulls in the request body and then creates a signature and returns that to the front end, where I can then create a session using the toolkit. There's also a couple other fun tricks here that I've thrown in. One is I do not need to deploy that, so I'll make sure I get that updated. One is how Express and static files can be served. So npm module for Zoom is the UI toolkit is brought in. How do I access that? We're actually skipping this larger one here. I'll come back to that in 1 second. But this particular one here is I run it mostly on Chrome. I assume it should run on most browsers, but we'll have I haven't necessarily run it through all the testing. David. So David asked if these functions will run on any web browser or there's restrictions. They should. And I'll get to the module for the front end too. This is the server side currently, and then so we'll get back to that, but then I can show you kind of how this works on the front end. So the module part is about the only would be the only restriction. So as long as the browser should be able to handle the module, I don't think it would have too much of an issue. Okay, so I haven't got there yet. All right, so the node modules folder is where the UI toolkit lives right now. And the app itself is in this source folder. So when it runs, it doesn't actually know about this node modules folder at all. However, my node process is being ran at the top level. So it actually knows about everything in this folder, including node modules. So what I can do is I can point to a specific folder, and using Express and the static, serve static is basically the library that's underneath the covers that Express is using. So serve static allows me to actually post these files in as a specific route. So instead of this being having to find node modules or pulling in a folder in here that's a node module, I can just use /zoom. So I thought that was a great trick. If not everybody may know about that, so definitely something that is certainly helpful to know about, where you can serve static files under Express this way. So I thought that's great. Now, the way I normally do it is I just would serve like public files by CSS, JavaScript files, index HTML, that kind of stuff, which is what I do here. And I also add the set headers, so they also come back with the the cross origin isolation to allow a shared array buffer to function properly. So take a quick drink, and if everybody has any questions, let me know.
Yeah, and well, Kelly's getting some hydration. Just want to emphasize again, like he said,
Okay.
this is line 26 to 29 is how he has made sure he has shared array buffer. So shared array buffer, so he can get all those features that come with it.
All right. Thank you. Yeah, good, perfect recap. Thank you. All right, and then the last thing is the index.html is served just from the slash. So that was what we saw here. It's just slash 3001. And goes through all that. Okay, so that's the server side that allows me to generate my token and serve up all the static files, all that kind of stuff. So in my index file, I really have it pretty low maintenance. I have so here's my new static folders /Zoom, right? So under /Zoom, I have my CSS for the toolkit, and then I have my own custom one in my public folder. So those are both in here, and that's all static files that get brought up. And then that's pretty much all I bring in there. And then down here at the bottom, I bring in the module JavaScript file here that allows me to run everything. So then the 4 states I have as containers. These containers are set to be hidden initially, except for the join. Join is just the form with the button and the 2 fields. Preview wrapper consists of a preview container and a button. This is all I need for my session. And then this is my final container that says, thanks for joining. This could be anything that you could go back to a website, right? I mean, all of these things can be replaced, and these can be on different pages, however you need to do it, right? Just trying to make this as streamlined as simple, so you sort of see all the pieces together in one space and can run it yourself and give it a shot. Okay, so let's take a look at what the module itself does. So first thing I do at the top is I just grab all the containers. So I have constants for those, as opposed to, I mean, I could put that in some other file if I wanted, but just makes it cleaner here, I think, so you can find them. But sets me up for success later. It gives me all this stuff. I don't have to rewrite these. I just have them set up. I also set up kind of a basic config.
Kelly, can I ask you a quick question?
Sure. Mm-hmm.
If you scroll to the top, how did you import in the UI toolkit?
Oh yeah, thanks. Completely skipped line 1. We should start at line 1. That's a good one. Okay, so this is the index file at Zoom, but remember, it's not at Zoom. It's actually node modules at Zoom / Video SDK UI toolkit, and then index.js. So I'm looking at this file right here. I probably should use the dist file, but it's fine either way. At this point, it's just a good example of how to do that. And then you can use the distro folder if you feel more comfortable with that. There's different ways you can pull it in, but that's just sort of the way I got it to work for me. So, but yeah, so essentially that is getting pulled in because of the static setup I have here. So /Zoom points to this folder, wherever it went. I lost it. Points to this folder in the back end on my server, and serves it up statically to /Zoom on the front end, which is really great.
Yeah, really cool.
Something I wish I'd been able to know a long time ago. Like, that is really neat. Okay, so then I take this is just, I drop on the window two methods. So when this runs, those 2 methods are available. Now my buttons can join the session and join the preview based on which button I'm pushing. And those are in the click handlers on the actual HTML itself. So join session and join preview. So come back to my Get Video SDK join preview. This all is just straight from the UI toolkit. I have an open preview. So everything that Rahima was kind of walking you through earlier on how, getting the audio started and getting the video started and making sure everything was there. That all gets ran with this line here and passing in the preview container, which I grabbed earlier in the file as a HTML element. I also just set the display to the join container and my preview wrapper. Flip-flop them to make sure that they're the right one's showing and the wrong one isn't. So, and that again, so this is the join screen here, and I would put in my name, and I would put in my role, and I would hit join, and this is where that just happened. So I just clicked the button here that clicks this join preview, and that gives me a display of none, opens my preview, and change it. Now you could set up this to be loading. You could have all kind of interstitials, whatever you need here, right? But this is just a quick, easy way to sort of show you how this flows. And then when I click join session is going to do a little more. The first thing it's going to do is grab a video SDK JOT and add it to my configuration up here. And it's going to run through this file. And all this is just a fetch method. So I grab the name, and you could have passcode, you could have geolocation, you could set up, you only want to use video and audio, or you want to have video and audio and users, right? You can set up all these different criteria and change it up however you want, and make, settings out all this for the getting, for the form in the start. So either way you want to run it, you can kind of do that however you want. I just grabbed a username because that was kind of the bare minimum, right? We need username and role, and then the token to create a session. So that was what Rahima, right? Rahima, that's what you mentioned earlier. Those three are the right. Those three we have to have. So I figured I'd just keep it as simple as possible. So that username comes in and it creates the config. If it isn't, as long as it's there, otherwise it'll do nothing probably. I haven't really tested it for the errors, so don't judge me on error handling. I can come back and fill those in. Just create an issue on my repo. That would be awesome. Okay, so config.username, and if that's there, then it's going to get my response, which is just going to that API generate route with a post, passing application.json and a header. This is super important. I didn't have this and spent about a good day trying to figure out why nothing was coming through. It's just because it wasn't asking for the right thing. So don't do what I did. And then the body is a JSON stringify. So you pass it in as a string, but I'm just passing in the tool and the row type, topic and the role type. Notice this role type, I am doing a parse integer here. So I'm grabbing the role from value, and then I'm setting that to a base of 2 because it should be a 0 or a 1. So that's pretty much it. So once I do that, I wait for the response, and then the signature, it becomes the video SDK JOT in the configuration, which then allows me to pass the session container HTML object and the config object into the UI toolkit join session method, which creates a session, initializes a session, does all that stuff, and then creates the container and everything, which you see. And I'll do, if I do an inspect on this as well, network, I hit join session. This might work. There we go. Yeah, so it's grabbing all kinds of fun stuff. Where is it? Generate right here. So here's my API call. Too low. Here is my generate API call. And the payload comes in, and then the response comes back with the signature. See, so that's all that does for me. But super simple. And then everything comes back, renders, I enable my audio, and I can turn my camera on. Maybe. All right. Might be working a little slow. Running 2 clients is never a great speed burst, so I probably gotta. Okay, so that's fun. I'll make sure it doesn't do that kind of thing, but other than that, it's It definitely works. It just is causing an issue.
Just taking its time.
Whenever you do live software, it never fails. It never fails. There we go.
Never fails to not fail.
Yeah, it never fails to go properly. Like it always something goes wrong. That's okay. Otherwise, you wouldn't know it's real. It would just it's just like it's all fake, you know, at that point, if it all goes right. There's no way. Okay, so that session gets joined, everything comes through, and then you close out the preview. And then I actually down here, all I have to do is set up a on session closed event handler from UI Toolkit. So when the on session closed comes through, it'll run this one, which actually just closes the session, hides that container, or closes that session out, and then shows the end container saying thanks for joining or whatever you needed to do at that point. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4 methods, and the UI toolkit and an HTML file. That's about it.
Demo gods.
Yes. And then let's see, we wanted to show if this had if I reset my permissions and I reload. All right, so it doesn't ask for anything there. If I hit there, it's going to ask me right here when I need permission for the preview, and I'm going to hit allow, which then allows me to turn everything on and join the session that way. Yeah, I think I have a memory leak of some kind. I just haven't figured it out. All right, and then we have, let's see. So we have Aaron has a question in the chat. Let's have a look at that real quick. Is there a way to trigger the prompt again? I'm sure there is. I don't know it off the top of my head.
Within the browser.
Is it the browser will have to redo it? So if I hit block, right?
Yeah.
All right, so now I have that not allowed error. So the methods in the SDK I shared earlier that check for if those things are allowed, you would want to run those checks. And if it's like, no, it's not allowed, maybe tell them to refresh or enable it in your settings or something like that. But I don't think you can physically trigger. Yeah, see, now it's just blocking altogether. So I'd have to go in and reset. I think once they hit like deny or block, I'm not sure where you go from there. So that's a good question. I'll have to find out what that is. But you do have a method to at least know that it doesn't have access. So okay, so let me reload this here. See if I can get this to actually run again. Yeah, you can style. Okay, so Mateo asked if there's a way to customize a session page built through UI Toolkit. You know, do you use branding, like branding, show, hide, everything? Can you just use custom CSS? So a little bit of both. I do have custom CSS to sort of color some things in the buttons and whatnot. If you want to reduce the number of features, we could run with just a couple. So I could actually like come in here. Let's just say I'll leave users, but I'll take out chat and share. And if I come in and reset. Join. All right, so now the share button is definitely gone and the chat button is gone. Now I have just users in setting. So that allows you to do some of that adjustments. Otherwise, if you want to like adjust the way the buttons look or where things are, yeah, it does take a little bit of custom CSS to sort of help with that. Prompt user, yeah, to refresh and provide it. Yeah, thank you for clarifying that as well, Michael. In the chat, I appreciate that. Okay, so yeah, so that's all kind of that's the app. So the app is pretty straightforward. If you want to install this, just go grab the code off of my GitHub. We'll share that again here in a second, and then I think I can do that real quick. And then just drop your keys in there and give it a whirl. Don't share it with the world, just try it out, see how it goes. Enjoy the process. And then if you have questions, we'll follow up here in a second and tell you a little bit more about things like where you can get help and where you can find us and talk to us, interact, that kind of thing. So here is again the example app. Go. And then David, he says, I have a book club that I want to use this for the meetings. Sometimes I don't know the members because of guest speakers. Can I send out dynamic invitations? I mean, you can use, so the thing with UI toolkit is everything comes in this configuration when you set up the session. So if you have like a book club that has users that can log in and you know anything about them, that's one thing, you can send out, but the dynamic invitations would basically come from some other process, not necessarily the video SDK. It would be some process that would allow you to send those out and get the set, if you set a specific session name or whatever, that kind of thing. But all we're doing is we're going to take in like a session name and passcode, but we're not really setting that up specifically. You would do that kind of thing with basically your own application logic, your own business logic, your routers, that kind of stuff. You would want to build that sort of logic out, or use someone's pre-built stuff that you can plug into, kind of thing. Okay, so are there any more code related questions? Because I think I can stop sharing, then we can sort of go back and just make sure everybody has a general idea of where to go from here and make sure they're set up for success, and we can close out. All right. Well, that was fun, Rahima.
It was fun.
Yeah, so I think this is our last one for the year, right? So everybody gets a little bit of a break in the holiday break over the next couple of weeks, and but we're going to come back in January and February with more, right?
We are definitely going to come back. And then sorry, I'm also just answering a question quickly in the chat.
Yeah, no, I see that from Aaron. Thank you, Aaron.
But yes, we'll come back with some more workshops in January. And yeah, at this time, if you all have we have some questions going in the chat. If you all have any other questions, feel free to ask. And we also have a survey within the resources tab that you can take and give us any feedback you have. Your feedback is always helpful.
Okay, Mateo is asking about how to draw all participants on the same canvas. What if we want to draw something else on top of the streams, like icons and all that? You would overlay. Can we do it like it? Yeah, you can do. Yeah, you should be able to do it like any other canvas. So you just want to. The idea is you want to render all the videos to one canvas as opposed to rendering them all to their own. But you can have a few. You can have a few canvas rendering and layered sort of thing. There's a lot of articles on optimizing canvas rendering that, as I get more comfortable with canvas rendering and optimization, I'll probably write some more stuff about that as well. So I think it's definitely, I understand your concern. I think there are definitely ways to go about it. And just make sure you're not gonna like overwork the browser, but I think you'd be fine.
And Pete, I saw you ask Pete the best way to contact us. You can reach a number of us on the developer forum and ask any questions that you may have there.
I think it'll be a good time to, maybe we can stop the recording, and if anybody wants to chat freely off the recording, we can go from here.